All right, we're diving right into a really big paradox today, one that's unpacked in a fascinating article by Dr. Ali Ghulam. It's this weird growing gap between what our modern economy says it needs and what universities are actually putting out. So let's get into it. So, this is the central mystery we're exploring. On one hand, you have companies that are just desperate for creative, analytical thinkers. But on the other, why are universities finding it so hard to produce them? This is more than just an academic debate. It affects pretty much everyone: students, employers, and the whole future of our economy. And you've probably heard this from both sides, right? Companies complain about a competency gap, while new graduates are out there feeling like their expensive diploma is basically worthless. Well, the core argument here is that these aren't two different problems. Nope, they are two symptoms of the exact same deep-rooted issue. So how in the world did we get here? To really understand the problem, we've got to rewind a bit and see how the whole point of a university education completely transformed over the years, because it wasn't always this way. This timeline really shows the radical shift. The story really kicks off after World War II. That's when the university's main job pivoted from, educating a small elite to becoming a factory for skilled workers to fuel the booming industrial economy. And this huge change has a name: massification. The idea was pretty simple, really. Let's expand higher education, let's open the doors to more people, and create this massive, skilled workforce that'll power economic growth. The university's new role? It was all about being functional. But then, by the 1970s, people started to question that idea. Sociologists like Randall Collins came along and pointed out something that feels kind of obvious now. Most of the really important professional skills, well, you learn them on the job, not in a classroom. So, what was the university really for? Collins came up with this really powerful alternative idea. He said education provides cultural currency. The diploma isn't just proof you learned something. It's like a token you use to buy your spot in the job market, in the social hierarchy. And that turns education from a quest for knowledge into this fierce competition for status. And what happens when everyone's in this relentless status race? You get something called credential inflation. It's simple supply and demand. The more people get degrees, the less each degree is worth, which means you need even more education, a master's or a PhD, just to compete for the same jobs as before. Okay, so you've got this real tension, right? Universities are promising skills, but in reality, they're operating as this huge status game. Something had to give. And that's when, in the 1980s, a new solution came onto the scene that promised to fix everything. This new solution was called New Public Management, or NPM for short. And the core idea behind it was, hey, let's make public services, including universities, way more efficient by running them like businesses. And what does running it like a business mean? Well, it meant introducing a whole toolkit of market principles. Things like performance metrics, privatization, constant measurement, and of course, accountability. Sound familiar? Now, the stated goal here was all about efficiency, but the article makes a crucial point. While universities might have gotten better at ticking boxes and meeting metrics, they became fundamentally less effective at their real mission. Actually fostering deep thinking and intellectual curiosity. And look, these weren't just changes on a spreadsheet. Applying market logic to education had these huge, profound consequences for the culture of the university and the very act of learning itself. And maybe the single biggest cultural shift was the rise of the student as customer paradigm. This completely changes the game. It's no longer about a mentor and an apprentice exploring ideas together. Suddenly, it's a service provider and a consumer. The student is buying a product. To be fair, people are really split on this. Critics say treating students like customers just leads to lower standards and makes education purely transactional. It's just about getting the degree. But supporters argue that it actually empowers students and forces universities to be more accountable. This whole transactional approach, this focus on efficiency and predictability, is what the sociologist George Ritzer famously called the McDonaldization of the university. It looks rational on the surface, but it's an irrationality that squeezes out all the intellectual depth. And it all boils down to these four principles. Efficiency. What's the fastest path to a degree? Calculability. Focus on grades and metrics, not the quality of learning. Predictability. Make every student's experience the same. And control. Use systems to manage everything. Just notice how every single one of these works against genuine, messy, unpredictable discovery. Okay, so we've laid all the groundwork, and this brings us right to the heart of Dr. Goulam's article, to the central, absolutely mind-bending paradox that it uncovers. This is where it all comes together. So think about it. On one side, you have the modern economy, the World Economic Forum, major corporations, everyone screaming that what they need most are people with high-level creative and analytical thinking skills.
And yet, on the other side, the very market mechanisms that were put in place to help universities meet that demand have created an environment that crushes originality, that rewards standardization, and that punishes the very kind of thinking the market is asking for.
And this is the absolute kicker. The market is basically pointing its finger at the university and blaming it for doing a perfect job of fulfilling the mission that the market itself demanded. It's a classic case of the supposed solution actually becoming the problem. So where do we go from here? Well, this leads to a really fascinating and pretty counterintuitive conclusion. The article argues that the answer isn't to make universities even more like businesses. It might be the opposite. And that leaves us with this one final, really provocative question to chew on. To get the kind of innovative, creative thinking skills it so desperately needs, does the university actually need to move away from the market? Does it need to be set free? That's the paradox at the very heart of this crisis.